8 a.m. on DD India.
Hello and welcome. I am Ramesh Ramachandran and you're watching World Today on DD India. It's 6 p.m. in New Delhi, 8:30 in the morning in Washington, D.C. and 8:30 at night in the Chinese city of Tianjin, which played host to Taliban co-founder Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar and others. So what is China up to really in Afghanistan? And why did Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, no less, meet with the Taliban leaders? And what does this troika or triad, call it what you will, of China, the Taliban and Pakistan mean for the future of Afghanistan? We're going to focus on Chinese designs in Afghanistan on today's show. All that and much more coming up over the next 1 hour. But first, as always, the headlines. China sides with the Taliban, hopes the group will put the interests of Afghanistan first in pushing for an early peace and reconciliation. Urges Taliban to cut its ties with the East Turkestan Islamic movement, which Beijing blames for terrorism and separatism. World battles COVID-19. Over 196 million people test positive for the coronavirus. 178 million recover. The deadly virus claims 4.2 million lives. The United States remains the worst affected. Bangladesh records the highest COVID-19 infections in a day with 15,230 new cases reported on Wednesday. The death toll crosses 20,000 despite a strict lockdown imposed in the country. And good news for India at the Tokyo Olympics. Hockey team confirms the quarterfinal place after beating Argentina 3-1. Indian shuttler PV Sindhu enters the last 8 after defeating world number 12 Mia Bigfeld. Indian archer Atanu Das knocks out third seed Korean and former Olympic champion Oh Jin Haek to storm into the pre-quarterfinals. Right, let's now bring you up to date on the COVID-19 situation. Now, so far, more than 196 million people have tested positive for the coronavirus, and 178 million people have recovered. The deadly virus has claimed 4.2 million lives. The United States remains the worst affected. More than 35.4 million people have been infected by the virus, and over 628,000 Americans have died so far. And talking about the pandemic, Bangladesh continues to report a high number of COVID-19 infections. Now this in spite of a week-long countrywide lockdown. A record number of 15,230 new COVID cases and 237 deaths were reported on Wednesday. The total number of deaths has crossed the 20,000 mark. Active cases in Bangladesh stand at over 154,000. The positivity rate, in other words, the percentage of people who test positive for the virus as compared to the total number of tests conducted, rose to 30.12%, up from 28.44% on Tuesday. Meanwhile, testing continues apace. More than 50,000 samples were tested daily for the last 3 days. Senior Awami League leader and Road Transport and Bridges Minister Obaidul Qadir said COVID-19 situation was getting worse due to complacency and negligence. Moving on, U.S. agencies on Wednesday mandated masks at federal buildings in COVID hotspots in line with instructions issued by the Biden government. The move followed guidance issued by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention on Tuesday. It said vaccinated people should wear a mask indoors in areas with substantial or high COVID-19 community transmission. The White House said masks are required indoors in federal buildings for all employees and visitors, whether or not vaccinated. Meanwhile, the U.S. state of New York will require state government employees to be vaccinated against COVID-19 or get themselves tested. Governor Andrew Cuomo said all patient-facing healthcare workers at state hospitals will have to be vaccinated with no testing option provided. The New York City mayor in turn announced a plan to offer New Yorkers $100 as cash incentive to get a COVID vaccine if they get the vaccine from a city-run vaccination site. The currency-inducing coronavirus shots will start on Friday at all city-run vaccination sites for those who can show proof of New York residence or employment. The city's 7-day average test positivity rate reached 2.55% on Wednesday, the highest in months. Now, England will allow fully vaccinated visitors from the European Union and United States without quarantine from the next week. The UK Transport Minister said on Wednesday that the decision aims to boost for airlines and travel companies. The UK government said that from 2nd August onwards, travellers with US and EU approved vaccines would not have to quarantine. The opening up of England would likely be followed by the rest of the United Kingdom. But travellers will still have to take a COVID test before departure and soon after arrival in England. Right, let's now go to our big story. Now, it was a sight to behold, one which at once exposed Beijing's hypocrisy and lay bare its designs on Afghanistan. The Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi flanked by Taliban leaders at Tianjin near Beijing. What's driving Beijing's outreach to Taliban? Find out in this report.
The civilian casualties are rising in Afghanistan with every passing day, and China is cozying up to the Taliban. China hopes that the Afghan Taliban will put the interests of the country and the nation first in pushing for early substantive results in the peace and reconciliation process. State Councillor Wang Yi even said that the Afghan Taliban is an important military and political force in Afghanistan and is expected to play an important role in the country's peace, reconciliation and reconstruction process, according to the spokesperson. 9 Taliban representatives, led by the Taliban's chief negotiator and co-founder Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar, met Foreign Minister Wang Yi in the northern Chinese city of Tianjin on a 2-day visit during which the peace process and security issues were discussed. China had urged Taliban to cut ties with East Turkmenistan Islamic movement, which is blamed by Beijing for terror activities and fueling separatism in Xinjiang region. This is the first time a senior Taliban leader has visited China since the group launched an offensive to capture territories across Afghanistan in the aftermath of the rapid withdrawal of US and NATO forces. According to Chinese Foreign Ministry, Wang told the Taliban delegation that China hopes the insurgent group will play a critical role in reconstruction of Afghanistan in the backdrop of US forces leaving that country. And in response to this, Baradar said that
Right, we'll come to that story in just a bit, but let's cut live to the MEA briefing happening in New Delhi.
Formal meeting between China Foreign Minister and Taliban representatives. Praveen Gautam from News Point is asking, तालिबान के एक प्रतिनिधि मंडल ने चीनी विदेश मंत्री वांग यी के साथ वार्ता की है. इसे भारत किस रूप में देखता है? Shrinjoy from Times Now is asking, is any military assistance to Afghan government likely? Pakistan has referred to Taliban fighters as civilians. Are the Taliban safe havens still there in FATA and Balochistan? Shankar from India vs Disinformation is asking, what plans have India with regard to Afghanistan, where Taliban-led violence has increased instability? Sadan from Vion is asking how much India is concerned about refugee crisis from Afghanistan. We have similar question from Swasani from Hindu, Pushkar from New Indian Express, Munish Gupta from PIO TV, Ranjit Kumar from Rakshat News.
Thank you. Look, I think they delay, all these questions relate to aspects of Taliban-China meeting as well as the Afghanistan developments. We have seen media reports, other reports in this regard. As you know, we are closely monitoring developments in Afghanistan. You would have heard EM speak at length on our perspective about the situation in Afghanistan during his press conference with Secretary Blinken yesterday. I would like to reiterate that India and the world wishes to see an independent, sovereign, democratic and stable Afghanistan, which is at peace with itself and its neighbors. Unilateral imposition of will by any party will not be democratic, cannot lead to stability, and cannot provide legitimacy. Gains over the last 2 decades should be preserved. I think that would address our larger perspective to all the issues that were raised in these questions. Yatin.
Pushkar from New Indian Express is asking, UK has announced donation of 10 million vaccines to Commonwealth and Asian countries. Any information regarding if and any doses would be given to India? Yesterday, Secretary Blinken announced $25 million for vaccine boost in India. Was this a part of Quad vaccination initiative or is it a standalone grant that US is giving to India? Huma from Financial Express is asking, any updates on the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines? Munish Gupta from PIO TV is asking, did India and US discuss joint strategy now or in the future on COVID vaccines for Africa and developing countries? Narendra Nath from Now Bharat Times is asking, कोवैक्सीन को WHO से मान्यता मिलने और ट्रैवल के लिए इसे स्वीकार करने के मामले में विदेश मंत्रालय के पास क्या कोई अपडेट है? ब्राज़ील में कोवैक्सीन को लेकर विवाद हुआ, क्या विदेश मंत्रालय ने इस बारे में वहां की सरकार से संपर्क किया है? We have similar question from Swasani from the Hindu.
Actually, that covers a lot of elements related to vaccines, but let me try to break that up. We have just seen the announcement by the government of the United Kingdom about donation of 10 million vaccines to the Commonwealth and Asian countries. That announcement does not cover India as far as I am aware, but we are ascertaining more details. We will certainly share any update as soon as we have it. As regards the announcement yesterday by Secretary Blinken of US $25 million grant, I think the US AID has issued a press release which outlines more details of this, and I would refer you to that. Let me add that India and the US are engaged as part of the Quad vaccine initiative to supply vaccines to countries in the Indo-Pacific region from early 2022, that's next year. India stands united with the United States and several partners in working towards containing the COVID pandemic and for quick global economic recovery. There was also a query regarding import of vaccines from the United States. As I have said before, our health regulators are engaged with foreign vaccine manufacturers in this regard. Please contact our concerned health regulators for the latest position of these negotiations. And finally, as far as Covaxin recognition is concerned, I have mentioned earlier also, Bharat Biotech submitted its request along with all necessary documentation earlier in July to the World Health Organization. I would refer you to the company for further updates, including actually on the issue of supply of Covaxin to Brazil, which was also mentioned in the question.
Abhishek from Republic is asking, during his Delhi visit, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with some civil society activists and apparently discussed issues beyond the pale of bilateral relationship. Like China objected to Blinken meeting Tibetan representative, does India also see it as uncalled for meddling? Nainima from the print is asking, how will Emir react to the fact that US sent out indirect messages to China by meeting Tibetan leaders here in New Delhi? We have similar questions from Shailendra from News 18, Siddhan from Beyond, and Sandeep from Tribune.
Look, you would have seen the detailed comments by External Affairs Minister yesterday during the delegation level talks as well as the joint media interaction with Secretary Blinken, particularly regarding the fact or his reference to conversations on contemporary issues from the framework of national experiences, historical perspectives, and unique contexts. I don't think I have anything further to add to that.
Shankar from IVD is asking, during US Secretary of State's visit, Quad was one of the agenda of talks with EM. Can you please share with us as to what was discussed with regard to the next Quad summit and its measures in the Indo-Pacific region? Jai Prakash from Dainik Jagran is asking, can you give the details of economic issue raised between Secretary Blinken and EM? Was the issue of the proposed e-commerce rules also raised by Secretary Blinken? When we are going to start talks on trade deal? Daria from Sputnik is asking, during the meeting with Secretary Blinken, did the Indian side call for maintaining sustained pressure on Pakistan for supporting terrorist outfits in the region? Did the US agree with Indian viewpoint? He is also asking about delivery of Russian S-400 missile system with India. What was the response of the EM? Huma with Financial Express is asking, during the talks with Secretary Blinken, did the sanctions on Iran feature? What about the sanctions on Venezuela? We have similar questions from Munish Gupta from PIO TV, Manish from Business World.
Look, these seem to be a whole set of questions relating to the conversations that took place during the visit of Secretary Blinken. Some of them actually also relate to other ministries. I would not really like to get into the specifics of the conversations that took place yesterday. You've already heard at length both the ministers and also their responses to the questions that were posed to them in the media interaction. Let me highlight that trade and investment ties, economic engagement including the digital domain, combating COVID, cooperating on vaccinations or vaccines, deepening Quad, the Indo-Pacific, countering terrorism, defense and security issues, as well as regional and global developments were certainly among the issues that were discussed during their talks. And I'll leave it at that. Regarding future meetings, I don't have any update to share for the moment.
Siddhan from Vion is asking, how does India sees development on elections in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir? Shailendra from News 18 is asking, हाल ही में पाकिस्तान अधिकृत कश्मीर में दुनिया की आंखों में धूल झोंकने के लिए चुनाव कराए गए. इस प्रक्रिया पर भारत का क्या रिएक्शन है?
Look, let me make very clear that the so-called elections in Indian territory under the illegal occupation of Pakistan are nothing but an attempt by Pakistan to camouflage its illegal occupation and the material changes undertaken by it in these territories. India has lodged a strong protest with the Pakistani authorities on this cosmetic exercise, which has been protested and rejected by the local people. Such an exercise can neither hide the illegal occupation by Pakistan nor the grave human rights violations, exploitation, and denial of freedom to the people in these occupied territories. Pakistan has no locus standi on these Indian territories. We call upon Pakistan to vacate all Indian areas under its illegal occupation.
Siddhan from Vion is asking, a joint press release after meeting of China and Pakistan's foreign ministers mentioned Jammu and Kashmir. How would you like to respond to that?
As in the past, India categorically rejects any reference to Jammu and Kashmir in such joint statement. The Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir and the Union Territory of Ladakh have been and will remain integral and inalienable parts of India. The joint press release has also made a reference to the so-called China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. We have consistently conveyed to China and Pakistan that the so-called CPEC is in India's territory that has been illegally occupied by Pakistan, and that we resolutely oppose any attempts by other countries to change the status quo in areas illegally occupied by Pakistan, as also to Pakistan bringing up any material change in Indian territories under its illegal occupation. We call upon parties concerned to cease such actions.
Sandeep from Tribune is asking, is there any forthcoming meeting of the Uzbekistan, Iran, India on the joint utilization of the Chabahar port? Could you give an account of the progress made in utilization of the port since December 2020?
You would have seen EM's remarks at the recently held meeting on connectivity in Tashkent, where he highlighted that India had taken practical steps since 2016 to operationalize the Chabahar port, and that its efficacy is now clearly proven. India has proposed to include the port in the framework of the International North-South Transport Corridor, the INSTC, and has welcomed the formation of the India, Uzbekistan, Iran, Afghanistan Quadrilateral Working Group on the joint use of Chabahar port. This meeting is likely to take place in the second half or the later half of this year. I don't have the immediate figure for 2020, but I can mention that since December 2018, Chabahar port has handled 134 vessels, 14,258 TEUs of containers, and more than 2.08 million tons of bulk and general cargo.
Sandeep from Tribune is asking, thousands of students wanting to resume their studies in China, US, EU and UK are complaining on social media about difficulties or discrimination at several levels. This is also the case for workers to many Gulf nations. What are the efforts and breakthroughs by MEA in this regard? Narendranath from Navbharat Times is asking, भारत में केस कम होने के बावजूद अमेरिका और दूसरे देशों ने अपनी हवाई सेवा अभी शुरू नहीं करने का फैसला लिया है। इससे हजारों लोग प्रभावित हो रहे हैं। विदेश मंत्रालय क्या इन देशों के साथ संपर्क में है?
Look, we attach great importance to these issues of simplifying travel, easing travel restrictions. The issue of normalizing travel of Indian citizens abroad has been taken up and is being taken up with the concerned authorities in other countries, given this, that there has been a significant improvement in the COVID situation in India. We have seen some countries taking positive steps in this regard. We will continue to press for further measures from all the other countries.
Manish from Business World is asking, is the EU-India FTA talks stuck as there is no indication of the progress made? Could you please elaborate on the progress and at what level the negotiations are taking place?
Actually, the India-EU FTA talks or the discussions are progressing as per our expectations. There have been informal discussions and exchanges between officials. India is waiting formal nomination of the European Union's chief negotiator, and formal negotiations are expected to resume after the summer break in Europe. Meanwhile, India is going ahead with its own preparations for these discussions.
Huma from Financial Express is asking, have the dates for the India-Africa summit been decided?
This is an important issue, but I'm afraid I don't have any update regarding the dates for the moment.
Meghna from Doordarshan is asking, India will chair UNSC from August. What will be the key areas of focus?
We are gearing up for this important phase in our membership of the United Nations Security Council, which, as you know, covers 2021 and 22. For the moment, for our presidency in August, we are looking at areas like maritime security, peacekeeping and counter-terrorism as important focus areas. We will try to share more details once the work plan for the month of August is finalized, which should happen in early August. We'll get back to you at that point.
Shailesh Kumar from National Defense is asking, While there are reports that China has been reinforcing military infrastructure at LAC, is there any progress for talks on disengagements of Chinese troops from Indian territories? Do we see Chinese willingness in resolving this standoff at LAC in eastern sector?
I know there has been a lot of interest in this issue, and we have been reiterating our position regarding the sequence of events that we would like to see, particularly regarding disengagement, de-escalation, and moving on to which would help pave the way for normalization. I don't have any particular update right now. We will share with you information regarding the next round of commander level talks, which, as you know, both leaders agreed, both ministers agreed when they last met, that's EM and Foreign Minister Wangi, to hold at an early date. And once we have more details on this, we will certainly share with you.
Elizabeth from Live Mint is asking, last week Foreign Secretary visited United Kingdom. Can you share details of this visit, please?
We had announced the visit of Foreign Secretary, I think during the last media interaction. Let me recall that Foreign Secretary visited the United Kingdom on 23rd and 24th July to conduct a review of the comprehensive strategic partnership that was launched by the two Prime Ministers at the virtual India-UK summit on May 4th this year. Foreign Secretary held detailed meetings with his counterparts and also met a cross-section of opinion builders, including think tanks and parliamentarians. In the discussions, the implementation of the India-UK Roadmap 2030 was discussed and assessed. Several issues of bilateral interest, including implementation of the Migration and Mobility Partnership, Global Innovation Partnership, climate action, return of economic offenders, defense and security ties, regional issues including Afghanistan, UN Security Council, and Commonwealth matters were discussed. The need for early removal of restrictions imposed on travel from India and the mutual recognition of COVID vaccination certificates was also raised by us.
I have no further questions, sir.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of this weekly media briefing. Thank you very much for joining us. Good evening.
Right, so we're listening to the Indian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Arindam Bagchi's media briefing live from New Delhi. We'll try to get my colleague Meghna Dev to join us momentarily to put it all in its proper context, to give you, the viewer, a perspective on the issues covered, including the Taliban leaders' visit and talks in China, and also the just concluded visit by the US Foreign Minister Antony Blinken to India as well, and other topics covered during that 15 or 20 odd minute briefing. But we'll get that in just a bit. But let me go back to the big story we're tracking here on World Today, and that is Chinese designs on Afghanistan. And with me is my guest Vishal Chandra, research fellow at the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis. Vishal, welcome to DD India.
Thank you.
Now, a couple of quick questions straight off the bat. Why did China host the Taliban leaders, and alternatively, why did Taliban agree to visit China in the first place?
Well, all the neighboring countries are looking at post-US scenario in
Right.
Afghanistan, and particularly their military withdrawal from Afghanistan. And each of the neighboring countries, they have their own set of concerns, though Taliban have struggled to convince and convey to the neighboring countries that they are willing to box themselves inside Afghanistan, that they are willing to take actions against groups that are considered as inimical to the security interests of the neighboring countries. But
Right.
it seems the neighboring countries are not as convinced because it would be expecting too much from the Taliban to cut their ties with Al-Qaeda and various other regional militant Islamist groups, because these linkages give Taliban
Right.
a lot of leverages vis-a-vis, and perhaps the only leverage they have vis-a-vis the neighboring countries. Secondly, they are looking for legitimacy, because as they have made advances, territorial advances inside Afghanistan, they have territory to themselves, and they are making huge claims about control over border crossing points and bordering areas of Afghanistan. Now, what could be of serious concern to Beijing is the fact that Taliban are now controlling almost the entire stretch of northeastern border, which touches upon China, POK, Tajikistan, parts of Uzbekistan. So obviously, Chinese are very worried about the situation in northern Afghanistan, unlike in the 90s when Taliban had a tough time, moving into north, and they failed to dislodge Commander Ahmad Shah Massoud from Panjshir and Badakhshan that actually borders China through Wakhan corridor. Now, secondly, if you look at the statement, the readout that was put out by the Chinese Foreign Ministry, while they refer to Afghan Taliban as an important political and military force, but at the same time, China seems to be setting terms and conditions here. They have very clearly said that Taliban will have to break their ties with all terrorist organizations, including, of course, they have emphasized EDIM here, and at the same time, they have emphasized that we expect Taliban to step up and work towards establishing a broad-based and inclusive political structure, political framework in Afghanistan. And this is exactly what Beijing had said along with the visiting Pakistan foreign minister on July 24th. So China somewhere is struggling, I think, like other regional countries, to find a balanced approach as of now. For they would not like to be seen, they are a member of P5, they would not like to be seen as undermining the UN recognized government in Kabul. And in fact, a couple of days back, the Chinese president and the Afghan president had spoken to each other, I think around July 14th or 15th. So on the one hand, they are in touch with the regime, with the government in Kabul, the elected government, the UN recognized government in Kabul. At the same time, they have their worries vis-a-vis Taliban and their allies, and especially the presence of foreign militant forces in northeastern Afghanistan.
Right, Vishal, stay on. I'll come back to you momentarily, but let me now bring in my colleague Meghna Dev, who joins us on the phone line from the MEA. Meghna, if you can hear me, walk us through the main takeaways from that MEA briefing. Also, very specifically, what did India have to say on the China-Taliban talks in particular?
Yes, absolutely. Very quickly, if just I list out a few of the important things that were the points that were made in the weekly MEA presser, especially a very strong stand on the illegal elections. A cosmetic exercise MEA has called that the so-called elections in the Indian territory under the illegal occupation of Pakistan. Obviously, MEA has clearly stated that it is an attempt by Pakistan to camouflage its illegal occupation and the material changes that it has undertaken in these territories. And MEA has very strongly, very strictly called upon Pakistan to vacate all Indian areas under illegal occupation. A very strong statement coming from India, and very clearly, the Minister of External Affairs has called it a cosmetic exercise which has been protested and rejected by the local people. It has been clearly stated, the readout clearly states that the exercise can neither hide the illegal occupation by Pakistan and neither it can hide the grave human rights violation, exploitation and denial of freedom to the people in these occupied territories. So very, very important and very strong statement coming out from the weekly briefing on this, the illegal elections. And besides that, when we talk about, different areas, when we talk about the vaccine, the questions were asked on the vaccine. So the MEA has said that the UK announcement on vaccines for the Commonwealth does not include India. But when we talk about, the announcement that was made by Anthony Blinken in the joint statement yesterday. So on that part, the MEA has said that the India and US are already engaged, in the vaccine initiative as being the part of the Quad.
Right, Meghna, hold your thoughts. I'll come back to you in just a bit. But if I can go back to my guest, Vishal Chandra, one more time on this discussion. Vishal, now coming back to the points you raised in your earlier intervention. Now, to help our viewers understand something very clearly and simply, what are China's interests in Afghanistan? You spoke about the Wakhan corridor and the ETIM. Is the East Turkestan Islamic movement, which China calls as terrorists or separatists. But that apart, in your estimation, would China be eyeing Afghanistan's mineral wealth, for instance, the Ainak copper mine, or for that matter, Chinese investments as part of its Belt and Road Initiative?
I think, if you look at the readout issued by the Chinese Foreign Ministry, they have very clearly said that they expect Taliban to play a positive role and create enabling conditions for security, stability, development, and cooperation in the region. Enabling conditions.
Right.
And their first concern, I think, is CPEC at the moment, because there have been instances when Chinese project personnel came under attack, and Chinese are well aware of Taliban's links with Pakistani Taliban, apart from other various Pakistani militant groups. But of particular concern to both Rawalpindi and Islamabad and Beijing is the Pakistani Taliban, the TTP. So obviously, Chinese have their own concerns and very serious concern vis-a-vis the security of the CPEC, the security of Gwadar, because it passes through areas which are unstable. And instability in Afghanistan means that the conflict will spill over onto the other side of the Duran line. Now that is going to create problems for CPEC, for the security of its personnel. And up north, across Amu Darya, Chinese, again, they have their energy pipelines coming from Central Asia. So obviously, if you look at the joint statement, I think that was issued when Pakistani foreign minister had visited couple of days back, or maybe before. There were references, I think, before when they said that Tajikistan and Uzbekistan need to work together. And I think the third major concern would be a long-term ideological threat, because Taliban now have a territory to themselves, which means Taliban are going to be more attractive for other Islamists active in the region, because Islamic State currently, well, they are not out, but they are certainly down. And Taliban are trying very hard to rope in their former colleagues who are in Islamic State, former Pakistani and Afghan Taliban basically comprise the Islamic State active in the region.
Right.
So there are groups divided, which have divided loyalties. Now Taliban would like to bring them, these groups which are pro-IS or which started supporting IS last couple of years. Taliban would like to bring them back into their fold now that they have their territory to themselves.
Absolutely. And finally, Vishal, very quickly, now let's take a step back and look at the three players in question: the Taliban, Afghanistan, or in fact Pakistan. So Taliban, Pakistan and China. How do you think this dynamic will play itself out going forward, number one? And number two, what might it mean for India and the world at large?
Well, very recently, President Biden has announced that United States would continue with humanitarian assistance, including assistance for the Afghan National Army, around $3 billion for this year and 3.3 for next year. Now, that's not the kind of assistance that Taliban or even the Afghan government and Taliban can expect coming from Beijing. So obviously there are limitations when it comes to engaging Beijing and the kind of system, whatever political framework that Afghanistan has, whether it includes Taliban, whether it is a Taliban-dominated system, still they would be requiring billions of dollars in assistance, expertise from outside, foreign investment. Now that is something which China may not be able to provide. So the whole idea of engaging Taliban by Beijing is to ensure that their projects are safe and their project personnel are safe, and that ETIM doesn't get the kind of support it often gets from groups within Afghanistan. So, and Central Asian stability is again very crucial, as I said earlier, for Beijing. But at the same time, they have to go along with Rawalpindi, with the Pakistan's military establishment, because they're dependent on them for the security of CPEC and for Gwadar and for the realization of their objective, to have access to the Indian Ocean. Right.
And Vishal, just under a minute, if you will, a quick word about Pakistan's role as you see it. And why do I ask? Because Imran Khan of Pakistan says the only good solution to Afghanistan situation is through a political settlement that is quote unquote inclusive and involves all factions, including the Taliban. He describes Taliban fighters as quote unquote civilians, and he says Pakistan has no favorites in Afghanistan, which is a complete lie. So your thoughts on how Pakistan is playing if at all it has a play in Afghanistan?
Well, the Interior Minister some time back said that new and civilized Taliban, prefer talks to guns, and Prime Minister Imran Khan, their Prime Minister too, has been issuing statements, including statements coming from their military establishment that we are not responsible for the Taliban, they're not under our control, etc., etc.
Right.
But the fact remains that the structures that help sustain Taliban, that helps Taliban sustain their levels of violence inside Afghanistan remains intact. It is very much intact along the Durand line on the Pakistan side. So while Pakistan, somewhere has succeeded in terms of diverting the international attention. So you have Mullah Baradar traveling to other regional capitals and at the same time keeping up the levels of violence inside. So the entire focus is on violence inside Afghanistan, and the entire focus is on his visits to other regional capitals rather than on what Pakistan is trying to do inside Afghanistan. Right. There might be a group within Afghan Taliban who might have realized the value of diplomacy, and that explains why at times they project a very moderate face, a ready to reconcile kind of a face. But at the same time, if you look at the kind of edicts that they have issued in areas under their control, they are same as the ones they had issued back in 1990s. So they definitely have adapted to the environment. Right. They are far more tactical when it comes to dealing with the wider regional or international audience, but their ideology remains the same. And I do not think that there can be any reconciliation until a group from the Taliban defects and accepts the current political process, because every country, including Beijing, is talking about an inclusive, broad-based political setup. Isn't the current one inclusive enough or broad-based enough? It is a multi-ethnic government that we have in Kabul. It is elected through electoral process, and it has people from various ethnicities as part of the government. The constitution recognizes all the major and minor ethnicities of Afghanistan. So there is already an inclusive political setup in Afghanistan.
All right, on that note, Vishal Chandra, pleasure talking to you. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Thank you. All right, let's now get you global weather update. The United States, Europe and South Asia all are facing nature's fury. In Germany, for instance, more than 170 people died in last week's flooding. It was Germany's worst natural disaster in more than half a century. More in the next report.
The extreme weather triggered by climate change is affecting the world. Nature's fury can be witnessed across the globe. From east to west, almost every country in the world is facing devastating impact of climate change, be it the raging wildfires of California or parts of Europe submerged in water and heavy rainfall and landslides in India. Deadly flooding ravaged parts of Europe, with Germany being hit the hardest. Extreme weather gripping northern Italy flooded the towns of Cernobbio after storms battered the picturesque Lake Como, a popular holiday destination for tourists. Residents were seen removing debris in front of a church as more than 60 people were evacuated after the towns surrounding the lake were hit by mudslides and floods. The bad weather comes after a weekend of fires and hot weather in the south of Italy that were particularly devastating on the island of Sardinia. More than 170 people died in last week's flooding, Germany's worst natural disaster in more than half a century, and thousands went missing. In Bangladesh, Rohingya Muslims, including children, were killed and many injured after heavy monsoon rains triggered landslides and flooding in refugee camps. Heavy rains are expected to continue for the next few days in Bangladesh. Rohingya refugees mostly live in shacks made of bamboo and plastic sheets that cling to steep bare hills, and flooding has further worsened their living conditions. On the other hand, California's biggest wildfire has incinerated more than 190,000 acres in Northern California. A fire scorching parts of Northern California's Butte County has ballooned into the state's largest wildfire. The officials warned that smoke columns could spawn lightning storms capable of igniting more fires. The swarming Dixie Fire gained ground on Saturday and was only 21% contained as of Sunday morning. Another wildfire tore through small towns nestled in a wooded area north of Athens. Spurred on by high winds, which damaged several homes. Plumes of billowing dark smoke were seen rising above houses. Fortunately, there were no reports of deaths or injuries. Meanwhile, a strong and shallow earthquake of magnitude 8.2 struck the Alaskan Peninsula on Wednesday, prompting authorities to sound a tsunami alert. The U.S. National Tsunami Warning Center issued alerts for southern parts of Alaska, Pacific coastal areas from Hinchinbrook Entrance to Unimak Pass. Warnings were also issued for Hawaii and the U.S. Pacific territory of Guam, which were later lifted by the authorities. In China, a sandstorm as high as 100 meters engulfed northwestern cities. The sandstorm turned the sky yellow and reduced the visibility to less than 5 meters in some areas. Due to this, the local police had to impose traffic controls on the city's highways and directed stranded vehicles to leave dangerous zones. Monsoon mayhem is also being witnessed in India. Initially, it was a major relief for Delhiites from sultry weather conditions as several parts of the national capital received rainfall, but gradually that rainfall increased, affecting normal life. According to the IMD, a thunderstorm with light moderate intensity rain is likely in many parts of Delhi NCR. Climate change has led to extreme rainfall, causing deadly flooding across western Maharashtra and other parts of India also. The death toll in Maharashtra has risen to 209. Few are missing. In Himachal, known for its tourism, 9 people died and 7 went missing in flash floods of Kulu and Lahore Spiti district. In another incident, a landslide occurred in Vikasnagar, Pantaghati Road in Shimla. No casualties have been reported in the incident. Scientists had already warned that climate change will lead to extreme weather conditions, resulting in heavier downpours and drought-like conditions, and that it could lead to more disasters. With Bureau Inputs, World Today Desk, DD India.
All right, take a look at what else is making news around the world in our News at Glance segment.
Pedro Castillo on Wednesday was sworn in as Peru's 5th president. He vowed to tackle what he said were persistent social divisions in Peru that dated back to colonial days. A leftist former teachers union leader, Castillo was elected in last month's vote as a representative of a Marxist party. Castillo gave his address amid strict health and security protocols. His inauguration was attended by heads of state and senior ministers from around Latin America. Haiti's newly sworn-in interim Prime Minister Ariel Henry on Wednesday said his government plans to work to allow the Caribbean nation to hold elections as quickly as possible after the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse earlier this month. Henry, however, did not say as to when the elections will be held. Western powers have encouraged Haiti to elect a new leadership as early as possible to give democratic legitimacy to the government. Presidential and parliamentary elections had been due to take place in September. Already struggling with political paralysis, economic malaise and gang-fueled violence, Haiti was pushed deeper into turmoil by the killing of Moïse. Israel Defense Minister Benny Gantz told his French counterpart that Israel took seriously espionage allegations concerning the Pegasus software developed by NSO that is suspected of targeting President Emmanuel Macron and other French officials. Gantz shared initial findings from a government assessment of NSO group exports with France. The phone of France's president was on a list of targets that were possibly under surveillance by Morocco, which used NSO's Pegasus software. Macron has called for an investigation. Turkish authorities on Wednesday launched an investigation into a massive forest fire that spread to the town of Manavgat in southern Turkey. President Tayyip Erdogan said his government hoped to put out the blaze without any casualties. Mayor Sukru Sozin said flames had spread as far as the town center, where many buildings were being evacuated. Authorities could not immediately say what caused the fire. World Today Desk, DD India.
Right, let's now take a quick look at updates from the Tokyo Olympics. And Indian Sports Minister Anurag Singh Thakur congratulated weightlifter Mirabai Chanu, who won the country's first medal at the Tokyo Olympics. He spoke in the Lok Sabha about the good performance by the athletes at the Olympics. He hoped for getting more medals in the coming days.
भारत की बेटी मीराबाई चानू ने जो देश के लिए रजत पदक जीता है, उसके लिए सारे सदन की ओर से उनको बहुत बहुत बधाई और बहुत बहुत शुभकामनाएं देता हूं। पहले दिन पहला मेडल ये पहली बार हुआ है और वो देश की बेटी मीराबाई चानू ने करके दिखाया है और मुझे लगता है ये हमारे लिए गर्व की बात है और आज भी सुबह से बहुत अच्छी परफॉर्मेंस वहां पर रही, आगे और मेडल जीतने की उम्मीद भी है।
The seventh day of Tokyo 2020 began on a rousing note for the Indian contingent. The Indian men's hockey team stormed into the quarterfinals of the Olympic Games with a comprehensive 3-1 victory over defending champions Argentina, scoring 2 goals in the final 2 minutes of its penultimate pool match on Thursday. After a goalless first 2 quarters, India broke the deadlock in the 43rd minute through Varun Kumar before Vivek Sagar and Harmanpreet Singh struck in the closing minutes of the match to seal the contest. Argentina's lone goal came from a penalty corner conversion by Shuth Casella in the 48th minute. It was India's 3rd win in Pool A. By virtue of this win, India have consolidated their position in the 2nd spot of Pool A with 3 wins and 1 loss out of 4 games behind Australia. India's Arjun Lal and Arvind Singh finished 5th in Final B, clocking 6 minutes 29 seconds and finished 11th overall in lightweight double sculls. Now, this is India's best ever performance in rowing in Olympics. Earlier, best was Dhatu Bokanal, finished 13th at the Rio Olympics in 2016. Reigning badminton world champion PV Sindhu sailed into the women's singles quarterfinals with a straight game triumph over Denmark's Mia Blichfeldt at the Tokyo Olympics. The 26-year-old Indian, who won a silver in the 2016 Rio Olympics, notched up a 21-15, 21-13 win over Blichfeldt in a 41-minute match. Sindhu will next face Akane Yamaguchi of Japan. The 6th-seeded Indian has a 11-7 head-to-head count against the Japanese world number 5, whom she had last beaten at the All-England Badminton Championship in March this year. Meanwhile, Indian archer Atanu Das hit the bullseye in a 1-arrow shoot-off to knock out 3rd-seeded Korean and former Olympic champion Oh Jing-haek and storm into the pre-quarterfinals at Tokyo 2020. It was one of the greatest wins for the 29-year-old India number 1, who had not had a good outing in the ranking round and was seeded 35th. Atanu Das showed amazing resilience as he bounced back from losing the first set to tie the next 2, force a decider and then edge out the Korean great by shooting a perfect 10 on the final arrow. And Indian boxer Satish Kumar is through to the quarterfinals in the 91 kg category after beating Ricardo Brown of Jamaica 4-1. Satish is now just 1 win away from a medal. If he wins his quarterfinal bout, he will be assured of at least the bronze medal. Right now, know all about what 29th July is remembered for in our Today in History segment.
On this day in 1900, Italy's King Umberto I was assassinated at Monza by anarchist Gaetano Bresci. King Umberto was crowned in 1878. On July 29th in 1937, coronation of King Farouk in Egypt's Cairo took place. His rule ended in 1952. Less than a year later, Egypt became a republic. In 1948, on this day, the first Olympic Games after World War II was opened at London's Wembley Stadium. On this day in 1981, former Iranian President Abul Hassan Bani Sadr granted political asylum in France. He went into hiding on June 12th, 10 days before Iran's 81-year-old revolutionary leader Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini formally removed him from office. On July 29th, in 1981, heir to the British throne Prince Charles married Diana Spencer at St. Paul's Cathedral in London. On July 29th, in 2003, Belgium's lower house passed a bill to scrap a controversial war crimes law which gave Belgian courts the power to try war crimes cases no matter where they were committed. In 2006, on this day, last contingent of Japanese ground troops based in Iraq came home and returned flags, completing the military's riskiest overseas mission since World War II. World Today Desk, DD India.
And with that, it's a wrap. But news continues here on DD India. You can catch all the latest updates on our social media, mobile and digital platforms. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.